I have already started some speeches with you. I want to know how many of you are pianists? Yay! And did anyone know this piece before? Okay, so it's the time for you to know a little more about this piece. After the premiere of Stravinsky's piano concerto for piano and wind orchestra in 1924, he has played this concerto for more than 40 times in the subsequent years. So by the time of 1928, he felt a little tired with the piano concerto with wind orchestra. So this is the time that he thinks, maybe I need another solo vehicle to develop my piano playing. So he started composing this Capriccio for piano and orchestra, which is the topic for my lecture today. And talking about my personal encounter with the piece, it started last summer when I was invited by the Hong Kong Sinfonietta to play this piece for a ballet by Helen Cha, and the ballet is called Rubies. It's the second act from a three-part ballet called The Jewels. And I was pretty surprised to find out that like 70 or 80 years before, this piece, the Capriccio, was very popular in Europe and also especially in America. But right now, nowadays, nobody really knows about this piece. Even with like us, professional pianists, we know Petrushka, we know some other Stravinsky pieces, but I didn't come across it, and some of my friends, they don't even come across it. And my Russian mafias, they didn't come across it either. So I think it's a pretty good chance for me to just find out a little bit more about this piece. So this is how I come across this project. So the goal of my lecture is to share with you some information that I gathered bits by bits over time about the compositional background of the Capriccio and the unbreakable relationship with Igor and Suleiman Stravinsky and its immigration from the concert hall to the theater under the sensitive choreography of George Balanchine. According to Igor Stravinsky in his 1936 autobiography, the title Capriccio was taken from the early 18th century composer and theorist Pretorius. Quote, "I worked at my Capriccio all summer and finished it at the end of September. I have so often been asked in the course of the last few years to play my concerto that I thought it was time to give the public another work for the piano and orchestra. That is why I wrote another concerto which I called the Capriccio. That name seemingly to indicate best the character of the music. I had in mind the definition of a capriccio given by Pretorius, the celebrated musical authority of the 18th century. He regarded it as a synonym for the fantasia, which was a free-form makeup of fregato instrumental passages. This form enabled me to develop my music by the juxtaposition of episodes of various kinds following one another, and by their very nature, give the piece the aspect of caprice, which takes its name." End of quote. In addition to the inspiration coming from the theorist Pretorius, the composer also it is in his habit to avoid giving serial names to his composition. For example, he created a couple of solo piano concertos, but he only entitled the first one Concerto. The rest of them, he has given them Capriccio, Movement, and Variation as their titles. The scoring of the Capriccio features a concertino section that is made up of a string quartet. Normally when we talk about string quartet, we think 2 violins, 1 viola, and 1 cello, but not for Stravinsky. It's 1 violin, 1 viola, 1 cello, and 1 bass. And they are all different. And the piano section consists of some woodwinds, brass, some percussion, and extra string. And on top of that, of course, we have the solo piano. Despite the heavy scoring, the texture of the piece is surprisingly light, and it's a lot lighter than the piano concerto with wind orchestra that he has just written 4 years before this. And the piano part plays either against a string ensemble or a wind ensemble in most of the time. And another notable feature in the score writing is the solo passages feature a lot of the techniques of the cymbalum. Cymbalum is a Hungarian instrument. It's a dulcimer that plays like this, and with the strings and with the what do you call it, the bridges and the strings, and you play like this. So we hear a lot of repeated note and fast passages that is a resemble of that type of instrument. So a quick look of the full score will show you the sparse texture of this piece. So I'm going to pass it around just to have a sense of how it is. So Igor Stravinsky started working on the Capriccio in December 1928 with the finale and finished the whole piece by 1929. The finishing time as well as the form charts are listed in the separate handout, and I want to direct your attention to this separate handouts as we go over the score examples. So the first movement is in rounded ternary form. I stated rounded is because the introduction is sort of the same, and the end and the coda. They are balanced out, so I call it rounded ternary. The introduction is consists of alternating section between the piano section, where we hear this whimsical runnings in the strings and the trio in the solo part, and the concertino part played in half speed and is so lyrical, and it sounds like this. So right now we come to the first theme. It was in G minor. The static motion and the chordal texture give us a very strong sense of pulse. And because of the really low register, we hear it as something mystical is going to happen. Theme A2 was in B flat major. It changed completely to a higher register, and it features some dialogues between the woodwinds and the piano. And the writing is so fluid and smooth, and it sounds like this. Now we come to the middle section. The middle section is in G major. It's in the next page of the handout. It's playful, it's jolly, and it starts the middle section in a completely different atmosphere. It's jumpy, and it features some big and small leaps, and a higher register and a lighter texture. A bouncing ball. Theme B2 is right in the middle of the piece. It is in G minor, and we hear some fluttering sound in the winds and some murmuring passages in the piano. It blends together pretty well. Theme B3, where we call it. It's in E flat major. It also serves as a retransition back to the recap. It's pleasant and smooth, and it features a dialogue between the piano and the clarinet. As I have mentioned earlier, a lot of passages in the solo part was written in the style of cymbalum writing. And here in your example, in the closing theme, we have some repeated notes on the score. You may want to pay attention to these passages during the performance later on, and I'm not going to play it on the recording now, so spot that out later. Let's take a look at the second movement. The slow movement has a clear ternary text structure. Section A was in F minor. The low register of the piano truly creates this dark mood after this pretty light-hearted first movement. Oops. There we go. Okay, turn to the next page. And we see the transition, which leads up from F minor to the dominant of F major. They're technically the same, but we are proceeding to a section in F major. The highly agitated mood is created by the nervous accompaniment in the lower winds. And above that is in your handout. We have the rhapsodic and quasi-cymbalum writing in the solo part. And now we come to the section B, a complete change of character again. Section B is in F major, is jazzy and humorous, and it features a pretty satirical duet between the piano and the bass clarinet. And you hear the pianist is a da 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 da. Really? Da 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 da. Really? It's commenting on the piano passage, so you may want to pay attention to that also. And then there are quite other numbers of passages in cymbalum writing. In the second movement, I hope you will be able to spot them out during the performance with the hint given on your handout. So I'm not going to play that again. Third movement. It's again in a quasi-sonata in a ternary form. It's the most rhapsodic movement among all, and only the development section of this movement can be divided into more than 5 different episodes and different melodic and rhythmic gestures. So it will be too detailed to cover it right now, and it will take too much time. So right now I'm going to play you just the refrain section, which will appear in the piece, and it functions as some very important punctuation marks. And it's in G major, it's playful and jolly. Okay, let's see. A1 and A2 on your handouts are 2 different themes, but sometimes they appear alone, and sometimes they appear as a combination. So when you hear this refrain, it means some big sections is going to commence or at end of the big section. So it's better to pay attention. Again, the refrain is elaborated with repeated notes in the solo part when it returns somewhere near in the recap. So I'm sure you will hear that later. So for now, let's put aside your scores. The 3 movements are intended to be played a tacca. So as a result, we have this whole piece sound like a series of heterogeneous episodes being stringed together. The piece was premiered on December 6, 1929 in South Cléo in Paris. Eastman, a suite conductor, was leading the Paris Symphony Orchestra, and Igor Stravinsky himself was on the piano. It proves to be a success, and it was reviewed by Leonard Adel. He said, "When the last chords have sounded, the genial ego is the recipient of a marked and vociferous ovation." By 1931, that's 3 years' time, this piece has been programmed more than 20 times. An interesting fact, however, is Igor Stravinsky is a rather anxious performer. So when Robert Simon reported that when he was conducting the Capriccio in Sao Cleo in Paris in 1934, Stravinsky suffered another memory slips. Another means he has memory slips before. A milestone of the Capriccio was marked a few years later, for it is with this work Igor Stravinsky introduced his son to the public. And his son's name is Sviatoslav Sulima. When the Capriccio was handed to his pianist son, it was early 1930, and his son is already in his early 20s. It's pretty late for a pianist. The piece started the father and son partnership, and they performed regularly as the conductor and the pianist from then on. This act not only allowed Sulima some visibility in the field, it also allowed the older composer to remain in public eye by taking the podium. Perhaps less scary than being the performer, I guess. When Sulima had the first joint performance of the Capriccio with his father in Barcelona in 1933, he momentarily stumbled. So it proves that he is actually pretty anxious too, compared to his father. And this act, like this mistake, actually alarmed both his parents a little bit. Whether it is a fortune for Sulima or not, he was well sheltered by his father's fame and glory. Father and son continue to play the Capriccio regularly and won praises for both their joint effort and for the composition itself. Count's review of their Venetian performance in August 1934 put it this way: "I have heard a great mass of so-called piano concertos, but I have never heard but one composition for the piano and orchestra, namely Stravinsky's Capriccio. Then the piano and the orchestra sounds like the two shells of a walnut. While I have sometimes thought I could hear or hear part of the noise of a composition by looking at the printed notes, on this occasion I had the mirage of seeing an unknown score from the audio stimuli offered." Despite the success in performance with his father, Sulima did not receive the same acclaim for his solo recitals. He felt pressured, being a contemporary of Rachmaninoff, who was also performing in the same cities and same concert hall by that time. In a letter from Catherine, his mother, to Igor on February 11, 1935, she mentioned that Sulima was devastated by some of the reviews, and she was concerned whether her son can really be capable to become a concertized pianist. She said, "Sviatchek very much need a few more lessons from Philip on his return, but this time on technique, which, in my opinion, he has neglected." Still, whatever anxiety the father has experienced, it did not stop him from employing his son as his substitute in public concerts on both this Capriccio and the earlier piano concerto. And at this time, I would like to pass around this, some reviews and pictures of some early history of this Capriccio for piano and orchestra. And that including some pictures of Sulima Stravinsky's American debut, which I found online occasionally, just searching on Google's, and they just pop up. So I thought it's pretty interesting. Sulima Stravinsky came to the America in mid-1940s, a few years after his father's arrival. Time magazine recorded on July 26, 1948. This week in Colorado's magnificent outdoor rock theater, Stravinsky will conduct the Denver Symphony Orchestra in his melodious Capriccio for piano and orchestra. To a family man like Stravinsky, this will be a special occasion. While he conducts and flaps on the podium like some little firebirds about to take wing, his pianist son, Suleiman, will be the soloist. Before a huge audience of 8,000 people in the open-air Recital amphitheater, Suleiman was introduced to the American public. A review by Howard Taubman in New York Times described his pianism as detached, and it reflects some objectivity of his father's scores. If the Capriccio has been such a dessert for this father and son partnership at the beginning, it probably became a bitter memory for both Igor and Suleiman Stravinsky when the father and son partnership ended in 1954 with the same pieces, and including the Capriccio. A few friends of Suleiman Stravinsky who attended his performance of the Capriccio, they suggest that the father and son partnership has reached to its turning point. Quoting from Charles Joseph, this implies that Suleiman Stravinsky's performance was still floored after many years of playing these works, and the elder Stravinsky has by now lost all the patience, realizing that Suleiman's proficiency as a pianist at age 47 has perhaps peaked. Suleiman was perhaps the best interpreter, in public eye at least, of Stravinsky's piano music. He even has his own performance or critical edition of the Capriccio, which we have very detailed markings, articulation markings, phrasing, and some paddling, which my pianist, Anya, has been using for performance. However, the limitation on the repertoire of Suleiman Stravinsky, he only played Stravinsky, his father's work, and some other composers like Scarlatti and Mozart. So this reduced his competitiveness in such a pianistic world where we have stars like Horowitz, like Richter, like Rubinstein, and even Jan and Cliven, they are enjoying their concert career. And another bitter truth is that even though Igor Stravinsky continued to employ his son as his substitute and play a lot of his own works, he never dedicated one single piece to his son formally. So this actually upset Suleiman Stravinsky a bit. On the other hand, Suleiman Stravinsky also tried to establish himself as a composer. But please take a look of the back of your handouts, and you will see his compositional output is pretty low. It features only some piano works and some chamber works. So after this end of father and son partnership, the Capriccio was rarely heard in concert hall again. Fortunately, the Capriccio found its way out through George Balanchine, a renowned choreographer and a long-term collaborator of Stravinsky on his ballet. The Capriccio was reborn as the music for Rubies, the second act from the trilogy entitled The Jewels in 1967, but it has been a long time between the end of the father and son partnership and the creation of Rubies. The initiation of setting a ballet to the Capriccio, however, was originally not in Stravinsky's favor. 15 years before Balanchine used this piece for Rubies, a lady from Tonawanda, New York, wrote to the composer, "Having been struck afresh by the ballet possibilities of your Capriccio, I should like to have your permission to work with it. I have in mind an allegorical theme, which I should carry out in decor and costume. And for reasons of economy, the score will need to be reduced. Perhaps 2 pianos and another instrument for additional color," written in 1952. The composer surely has the patience to respond to a request like this. He wrote back and said, "I appreciate your interest in my Capriccio, but I'm sorry to say I disagree with your idea of using the music for a ballet.
My feeling is strongly against it, notwithstanding the fact that I do not approve neither of any tampering of my instrumentation. Given the above correspondence, why would Valentine succeed in using this Capriccio for his ballet? Could it be the loss of hope in Stravinsky? He thought, oh, our father and son partnership has ended, but I have always kept the authority and the ownership of my pieces under my control. So nobody else is going to play his piece if his son is not going to be a pianist anymore. Maybe he got this concern, but we are not sure. But to understand how much trust has been built up between Igor Stravinsky and George Valentine, we better have a quick examination on all the collaborative history of these two giants. Valentine has been using Stravinsky's music since he was a really young choreographer, newly hired by Diaghilev to create work for his company, the Ballet Russe. One spring day in 1925, Igor Stravinsky, age 42, I guess, paid a visit to the Ballet Russe in Monte Carlo to reserve a restaging of this 1920 musical fairy tale called The Song of a Nightingale. In charge of the rehearsal hall was a thin, intense 20-year-old dancer, George Valentine. Despite of the differences in their age, Stravinsky, the master, soon began to realize the musical intelligence of George Valentine. For the latter was quick to grasp what underneath his music and was quick to match the music with dance material that would not upstage it but complement it in a very imaginative way. The two giants first collaborate on the chamber ballet called Apollo in 1928. After Diaghilev died suddenly in 1928-9, the Ballet Russe disbanded, and Valentine and Stravinsky, like the other members of the company, they all go out and search for new directions. Both of them settled temporarily in different parts of Europe for several commissions, but they all made their way coming to America, just like all of us. So, George Valentine started a ballet company, which later becomes the New York City Ballet in 1933, and 6 years later, the old composer also came to the United States. Altogether, there are 29 Stravinsky/George Valentine ballets, and Rubies was produced after the famous Greek trilogy, Apollo, Orpheus, and Argon, where the latter two ballet scores were written exclusively for Valentine. 4 years before Rubies, he also set to Stravinsky's movements for piano and orchestra, his third piano concerto, a ballet, which Stravinsky expressed this experience as hearing the music with one's eyes in Valentine's stance, and further comment that their collaboration has been like a tour of building for which I have drawn the plans but never explored the result. So now we can understand why Stravinsky finally entrusts this piece to George Valentine and have it choreographed. Now let's turn back to the Jewels and the Capriccio. The Jewels was premiered on April 13, 1967 by New York City Ballet in New York City Theater, State Theater. All the 3 acts are plotlet dances set to music by Fauré in Emerald, by Stravinsky in Rubies, and by Tchaikovsky in Diamonds. While the other 2 acts, they preserve some conservative elements and the gracefulness of the traditional ballet. This middle part, Rubies, jumps ahead to the jazz age in America. And I'm going to show you some short videos of this ballet that I played for last summer. this is at the end of the second movement. And right now I'm going to show you a little bit of the finale. Okay, I think Balanchine must be really familiar with the piece when the composer toured with it in 1930s and was aware of its potential of being a dance piece. It has the constantly changing characters, harmonies, orchestral timbre, but on top of everything, it has such an electrified pulse. This piece evoked the complex rhythm found in American jazz, as well as some tonal experiments. It reflects some tonal experiments of the 20th century avant-garde composers, which matches the movement of the feet, the hips, and the angular shapes of the Broadway style that Balanchine was trying to incorporate in his dance. Both the dance and the music were created in such an absolute American flavor. Ruby soon becomes the most performed excerpt from the set and was telecast several times in the subsequent years on both NBC and the PBS Dance in America series. Nowadays, the Capriccio was more frequently heard in the theater than in the concert hall as the soul for rubies. And rubies become a standard repertoire for major ballet companies around the globe, and especially in America. Even though it was not something that Igor Stravinsky has intended at the beginning, the fate of the Capriccio actually turned out to be pretty optimistic after the end of the father and son partnership. Then we don't hear it in the concert hall anymore, but still, we will find it somewhere. In the remaining time, I want to perform this jolly piece for you. Despite the absence of orchestra, I still hope that it will give you a sense of how it is as a piano concerto. And afterwards, if we still have time, I welcome any comments or questions regarding the piece, the presentation, or any of my experience playing this piece. Thank you.
Some may not know who your pianist was in the
Oh,
orchestra.
oh yeah, it's from Rochester. She's probably one among us. She's the one who knows the weather so well. My 12th corner orchestra. And
Was that the New York City Ballet on the screen?
no, that was the Hong Kong Ballet.
Oh, Hong Kong. Now, what was your experience with that, with the Hong Kong Ballet?
Like in general?
Yeah. Had you played the piece before, or
No.
did you learn it for the ballet? Or?
Yeah, I just do it for the ballet. I got an invitation in March last year, and the director of the Hong Kong Symphony Opera, she emailed me and asked whether I'm interested to do this piece, and she said, but this time in the orchestral pit, and I'm like, orchestral pit for a piano concerto? And she's like, yes, because it's in collaboration with the Hong Kong Ballet, and so I know that it's actually for the ballet. So I come across this piece. I learned it after I'm done with something else. I can't remember. I learned it in May, and then I have to perform it in such a short time. And then a couple interesting things to work with the ballet dancers. I have to go to their rehearsals, and you have to look exactly how they are doing the gesture, because once you are down there in the pit, you can't hear anything but hear this. But I don't know what's going on upstairs and how do they look like. It's actually when I got the DVD that I actually see how they are, because I have no idea how it is like. And the other thing is the tempo, because the dancers can twist that fast. So the tempo is a lot slower than what I thought to be. I dig out all the CDs from the library. I'm like, that's pretty fast. I'm like, I wonder how the dancers is going to do their turns, double twist, triple twist, I don't know. But then eventually I came to the conductor and he said, no, it's a lot slower. It's so I'm like, okay, that sounds like a slow practice time. And it actually takes me even more effort to pull it back, the tempo. I don't know whether pianists will agree with me, but usually when we practice over speed, it's a lot harder to pull it back. So when I asked Ms. Chu, well, should I do it in the ballet speed or concert speed for my lecture? And she said, of course it's a concert speed.
You don't remember that. You made that up.
No, I didn't.
There's a question over there.
Yes.
When you play the piano, does the music, how do you know where to put your hand on the keys? Does the music tell, and how?
You mean the piano, or how to match the dancer?
No, how to put your hand on the correct keys.
He's asking
Oh.
about reading the music.
Reading
It's
the
very
music?
quick. I noticed it was very quick music. So, how do you know where to put your hand on the correct keys? Does the music tell you?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Like, it will.
How?
Like reading the score, you have sharps and flats, which indicates the flat keys.
Uh-huh.
And diatonically, like the white keys, it will have no indication. Like, you have the note, but it doesn't have all those sharps and flats before it. And you mentioned about how I actually got my hands there. It's two things. I memorized the score, the reading score, and then I play the same gesture again and again. Physically,
Quite
you will
1,000
remember.
times.
Yeah, physically you will remember where to jump. Like if you
So
got
you
this.
memorize some.
Yeah, I memorized the score, and I actually memorized the sound. I know how it. If I hit the wrong thing, then I would notice. Oh my God, I hit another wrong note.
He'd probably be interested in looking at the score after we're done
Oh,
tonight.
yeah.
You know where to put our hands.
Like if I got black keys. So we'll have some indications like this. And these are the white keys. It doesn't have any indication. So make sure that you jump to the right note. It will happen. And then after 1,000 times, we're repeating the same gesture.
Does this require a piano a lot of practice per week?
Pianists, well, depends. Sometimes you need to
practice away from the keyboard to get some emotional or mental to work on. But like mechanic practice is necessary, especially for pianists at a professional level.
Did you use the score in the pit?
No.
Or it was memorized from the
Yes, because it gives me more freedom to look at the conductor. He's going to give me the signals where exactly the dancers is going to come. You know, it helps to do this. And if I got the score, then I can't look at him.
And after rehearsals, was it with the second piano or
With the orchestra.
with the orchestra?
Yeah.
When you were doing research, looking at the history of performances of this piece, did you ever come across the name Adele Marcus?
No, I don't remember seeing his name. I was trying to see who actually did the premiere of the Rubies, but it's not him.
Her.
Oh, sorry. Her.
Yeah.
Because you were under the impression she had.
Yeah,
done
she
the
was my
premiere.
teacher at Juilliard, and I was under the impression that Stravinsky, she had played it. He asked her to play it, and I thought it was one of the premieres. And for some reason, I thought maybe it was a Los Angeles premiere or some premiere in one of the major centers here in this country.
Okay.
And
I'll try to find that out.
yeah.
She found everything on the concert review in Paris.
Well, when you do a search, Google search, or like New York Times search on Stravinsky, it's going to give you more than 3,000.
Well, you know, you might Google Adele Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
See, you can find it that way.
Do you play any other Stravinsky?
I never played any Stravinsky before this piece. So I heard a lot of Stravinsky in other works. And then Bobby has just played the concerto just 1 or 2 years ago, right, with the wind orchestra. So I have the image of that static Stravinsky. And when I come across this piece, I'm like, it sounds like Pull Out to my ear. In a way. It sounds a little like Ravel, like Pull Out doesn't sound the Stravinsky to me. So it's interesting how he changes, like how composer actually changes their style constantly to challenge themselves and to challenge the audience. So who I am, you know.
Guess who is this? Quiz.
Have you had the opportunity to play it much? Have you had the opportunity to play this piece much, other than in Hong Kong?
No, not yet.
It was just this last summer.
It was just this last one.
Yeah, I just did it. Like the video that you saw actually is my recording. So, yeah, I get it as a Christmas gift. It's very festive color for
I
Christmas.
didn't realize that you played it from memory for the ballet. I didn't know that till tonight.
It's easier
Yeah.
because you need to be aware of it and what's going on. I use the score for rehearsal, but I put it aside at the dress rehearsal and the actual performance.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.